Lars, it's time for your favourite topic, transfer windows. I know you love this so much, and I've just seen.
I don't hate it. Come on, I don't hate it. I dislike ref chat more than I dislike transfer chat.
Well, as the summer transfer window is closed in almost everywhere except perhaps Turkey and Saudi Arabia, it's time to talk about who...
And Belgium.
And Belgium, are they still going?
Yeah.
I didn't realise that.
Still open for business.
Oh my goodness.
The end of the week.
So there's still some business to be done, no doubt. But let's talk about the business that has been done so far, Lars. What kind of a transfer window has it been? And obviously, the Premier League has a huge impact on everybody else's transfers.
It does, because the Premier League is, of course, where the money is. And it's been kind of a strange summer in that all the headlines in England have been about how this is just incredible amounts of money being spent, which is true. But of course, this is not true across the continent. In most other countries, the television deals, which is kind of the economic fuel that the football industry runs on, have been going down, have been shrinking rather than going up. And in some cases, or in one case like France, they don't really have a proper deal at all. They're trying this in-house solution. So there's a lot of financial uncertainty around the continent, and that will affect the transfer market in a very, very big way. And it means that actually selling players to the Premier League very specifically is a huge thing now, to the point where I even wonder, and I think Andy has both spoken and written about this in the past, I do wonder if at some point we will see a very clear tendency of clubs prioritizing player types that they think they can sell on to England. For instance, I think physical capability, like everyone likes big, strong players. That they will be valued and prioritized more by the academies, because you're essentially like raising players to eventually you're hoping to sell them to the Premier League so you can get money in, because the Premier League is where there's money. So that is something that everything kind of. If a Premier League club suddenly turns up and signs a player for 30, 40, 50 million, then that club that they sign from can spend it. So everything kind of springs, the knock-on effect from Premier League business is huge.
That's an interesting point that Lars made there about other leagues looking at players and thinking, will this player fit for a Premier League sale at some point or other? Can you see that going on already from this summer transfer window?
It's not a new thing. It's not a new thing. Like European clubs, and particularly the ones in the second tier leagues, have been doing that for 15 years plus. Like looking at how can we really develop players who Premier League clubs want to buy, and that's just a reality of the market. So I think you've seen it with Dutch football becoming more physical, with Portuguese football becoming more physical. The sort of leagues where their economic model, even for the biggest clubs, relies on selling. That is a reality of what you have to do.
Ekitike, maybe an example of that.
Yeah, I think you can look at like Nico Gonzalez as well. In terms of like developing players like that. Of course, he came from Spain, but was developed in Porto, and it's not in the past. I don't think he would have gone to Portugal and bought a 6'2" midfield brute, really, would you? But that is where we are at the moment, and of course they've done very well out of it. It's been successful, but like Lars says, this doesn't really exist in a bubble. So we talked about Porto, and they obviously realised that they had to do some sort of catch up this summer, and Andre Villas-Boas has made sure his new coach Francesco Farioli is very well looked after. Spent a lot of money, and Benfica have been active in the market as well. You've had Sporting with the Gyökeres money. The Portuguese league has spent more than it's ever spent in a window, which is remarkable, because essentially it rests on the shoulders of those three clubs. The clubs at the bottom of the league have got no money at all. In the bottom third of the league have no money at all. So, like Lars says, the Premier League money cannot exist in a bubble. It just can't.
So, having said that, Lars, who are the winners and losers from this transfer windows? Which clubs have done good deals in Europe, and which players perhaps have done really well with the transfer or not, as the case may be?
Well, it's funny. We want to mix it up. We try not to like regurgitate. We had a whole segment on Leverkusen, but I kind of like what Leverkusen have done in terms of replacing Florian Wirtz. I mean, we're maybe not spend too much time on it, but like getting in guys like Malik Tillman, like Ben Zahir, Loic Balde to replace Jonathan Tah. Seems kind of good. Like Anis Poku from AZ Alkmaar is an interesting one. They brought in Jal Kwanzaa for Liverpool for a good fee, but yeah. This seems like a crop. It wouldn't shock me if that crop, develops nicely together and grows into another competitive team for Leverkusen. One team that I just, in the sense that it could make them more. I mean, Juventus. I wasn't super keen on their window until like right towards the end when they bring in Lois Openda on loan, which I think he's a very good player. And one of my sort of low-key favorites around European football, Edon Zhigrova, the Kosovoan winger, who was last playing for Lille, who I always had tagged as like a creative, technical guy who might be too eccentric to play at one of the very, very top clubs. Like the sort of a Balkan charisma character. But he's now gone to Juventus, which is great. Yeah, but the Balkan charisma. Which is like, I just think Juventus was such a boring team to watch last year. So them signing just a relentlessly fun player is, and of course Jonathan David going there as well. So like maybe these are transfers that I, as a neutral, like because it makes me. I think watching Juventus could be less dull.
You add those three to Kenan Yildiz. I think you got something pretty exciting, and I think the value. Juventus getting value in a summer where they're sort of exhibiting their past mistakes by trying to ditch Dusan Vlahovic and really struggling to do so because he earns 12 million a year and he's only got a year left of his contract. Even with that, they're struggling to shift him. I think this is a move to like a new era of Juventus when you're looking at Openda. And if you look at Openda's goal record in the past 3 seasons, they've got themselves a brilliant deal there. Him and David should be a really interesting link. And Zhigrova, who I think it's really interesting how, of course, Kosovo international, that would, of course, if he arrived as a Kosovo player at Juventus, he would take up a non-EU place. So it was quite interesting to see him get a Albanian passport last week. Albania's prime minister is a very out and proud Juventus fan.
I don't know what connection you're trying to make there.
It appears to have been expedited quite quickly.
I hope you've got your visa to Albania already. Let's put it that way. But you mentioned Yildiz there. What about the Turkish transfer window, which is still ongoing? I see that Fenerbahce have signed Edison. One of the solutions for them? Possibly?
Yeah, and I think if you look at the way that Fenerbahce have playing out from the back has been a bit of an issue for them. Obviously, they've got a load of talented players in their squad, but playing out from the back has been an issue for them. So even though many expected Edison to go to Galatasaray, he makes tons of sense for Fenerbahce. And his ability to be a goalkeeping playmaker, he could really forget like Asensio, John Duran, whoever else you want to talk about. Edison could be the key for them and help them to really close the gap with Galatasaray. Now, of course, Galatasaray went and spent 27 million on Turkey's starting goalkeeper, Uğurcan Çakır, on deadline day. Now, there's very much a deadline day tax on that. The advantage for them as well as having a homegrown player, because he's from the association, is the fact that they're not paying him anywhere near what the wages of Edison are. So they're paying him, it goes up in increments season by season, but they're paying him a touch under 2 million euros in the first year. Now compare that to the wage bill and staying away from FFP type business, especially as they're hoping to expand and compete in the Champions League. They've got themselves a top goalkeeper, and even if they paid a lot in terms of transfer fee, in terms of wages, they're actually making a decent saving.
The one that surprises me, Lars, is Stuttgart, who made a ton of money when they sold Voldemort. They're struggling to spend that money. How come?
the way you pronounced them, it almost made it sound like you said Stuttgart made a lot of money from selling Voldemort, which is, I mean, I guess if this is the transfer you want to make, you want him out of the building. He's not doing you any help, not doing you any help in the dressing room.
Lord of the Rings,
very unhelpful character. I've also, there's also a case to be made that like making a mad trolley dash towards the end when everyone knows you've just got a ton of money from a sale is maybe not the most sort of strategic thing to do. They have brought in Bilal El Kanous on loan from Leicester, which I think is quite a canny one. The other clubs in England were looking at him. Hard to be a creative player for Leicester last season, but he showed some very nice touches. I don't hate that. On a completely different note, I want to head back to Italy because I'm kind of fascinated by the two Milan clubs who have had very different windows. Inter, if you look at the players they've spent money on, Luis Enrique from Marseille, Boni from Parma, Andy Diouf from Lens, and Petar Susic from Dinamo Zagreb have come in. Now, the ages of these players, Enrique is 23, Boni is 21, Andy Diouf is 22, and Petar Susic is 21. So that is a very clear sort of... It's a clear sign that they've realized that as much as they've been successful recently, or been doing well recently, that squad was getting old. And they are having to add some young guys to balance that out. Whereas across town, I think Milan have had kind of an interesting window. Because I remember watching them last year and thinking there's so much of this that is just get the ball to Rafa Leao and see if he can do something. Like they had a real problem. I saw several games with Milan where they really struggled to create chances in any other way. And they've completely reconstructed their midfield now. With Luka Modric coming in, of course, being the headline-grabbing transfer, but also Ardon Yashari coming in from Brugge, Samuele Ricci coming in from Torino, Rabiot now, right towards the end of the window, after that punch-up at Marseille, Rabiot's coming in. So that's obviously going to add a completely different, that's a whole new midfield. And Christopher Nkunku coming in from Chelsea. And Nkunku is such I mean, we forget, because he's had a bad time at Chelsea, Nkunku was phenomenal for Leipzig before that. So that's kind of an interesting... And for a team that really needs a bit of star power, like we talked about it also in a previous pod this autumn, there's been a lot of resentment from the fan base at Milan against the current ownership for pursuing this kind of Moneyball type of strategy. Well, now we've brought in a couple of really recognizable names there in Modric, of course, and I mean, interesting. I'm not quite sure how Nkunku will be viewed, but again, he's a former, I think he was player of the year in Bundesliga before when he scored like 20 goals for Leipzig. So he's got a potential to be a real star for them. And Rabiot, who of course is a well-known name, however you feel about him. So feels like a pretty significant window for Milan.
The quality is undeniable, but also the lack of plan is undeniable. It feels like Lars is just like named a string of good players. If we're having this conversation 4 weeks ago, you wouldn't have thought one club has gone out to sort their needs by buying these players. And Rabiot wasn't even on the market like 14 days ago, was he? So I think the Nkunku thing, they start the window looking for a completely different type of striker, and they end up with him. See, where you said Inter versus Milan, from that feels like plan versus no plan, which would concern me if I was a Milan fan. I wouldn't quite put them in my transfer window losers. These are all the guys who are like fiddling about with fax machines at the last minute, like Athletic obviously going to cast as FIFA rejected their registration to bring back Aymeric Laporte, about Sporting thinking they had Jota Silva, getting him through the transfer matching system with FIFA, and then not managing to register him with the Portuguese league by 1 minute. 1 minute.
Easily done. And did we mention...
Apparently so.
Did we mention how Johan Wissa, formerly of Brentford, of course, almost didn't get his transfer over the line by 1 minute? 1 minute.
Yeah, he forgot to add one signature.
But he got there in the end.
Didn't he? It's easily done for anyone who's ever had a mortgage.